What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a brand new horror movie that just released that is based on a video game that, to be quite honest, I've never played before. And I saw the trailer to this movie a few times earlier throughout the year. And what I will say is, I by no means from the trailer thought that this was going to be incredible, but I thought there was so much about the concept of this that was interesting that as long as it was executed in a way that paid attention to the detail of like the character designs and the creatures and the kills, that I was hoping that this would at least be a fun experience. And this is directed by David F. Sandberg, who's done a lot of horror movies in his career. I actually really enjoyed Lights Out. I didn't mind his Annabelle movie. I've never seen either one of the Shazams, but as far as his venture into the horror world, he's made enough enjoyable content in his career that I figured that this would be at least serviceable. And the movie I'm going to be telling you about today is Until Dawn. Until Dawn is directed by David F. Sandberg. 1 year after her sister Melanie mysteriously disappeared, Clover and her friends head into the remote valley where she vanished in search of answers. Exploring an abandoned visitor center, they find themselves stalked by a masked killer and horrifically murdered one by one, only to wake up and find themselves back at the beginning of the same evening. So, like I said, premise sounded super interesting for this. I'm sure it's a fun video game from the sounds of the concept, and was hoping that this would be at least fun. And that's how I would describe this movie. It's fun. It's very flawed. It's not a great movie by any means, but I think foundationally here, the concept is so interesting and there's a lot of attention to detail in the production design, in the practical effects, in the look of the creatures, and the way that it explores its lore and kind of unpacks information to you. It keeps you hooked onto the screen, and there's a numerous amount of flaws in this movie, but I think if you're a fan of horror, you'll find something to appreciate with this film. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit with you today. So, the plot of this is super simple. Obviously, like the plot description stated at the beginning, we're introduced to this group of friends who the main girl, I guess, is Clover, and her sister a year ago has disappeared. And they've been traveling throughout the country trying to find out exactly where she disappeared to, and they have not had any luck. But Clover has a video on her phone that her sister sent to her outside of this gas station, and they've managed to hunt the gas station down. And so they get there, and as per horror movie tropes, there's a creepy old guy that's running the cash register at the gas station. She asks him if he's seen her sister, and he's like, "Oh, we've got a lot of people that come around here, and a lot of them go missing, not here, but down the road a ways." And so she's like, "Hey, we've got to go to this place and find out, did my sister disappear in this area?" So they drive their car to get there, and they hit this really heavy rainstorm until they stumble upon this welcome center. And as soon as they pull in, it's like the rain hard cuts off. You can still see the rain going, but where the visitor center is, there is no more rain. And they go inside, and the place seems abandoned, and they find all this different stuff. They find a welcome book where names have been repeated over and over again. They find a poster on the wall of all of these people that say that they're missing, and things are definitely uncomfortable. And on the wall, there's this big gear mechanism with a giant hourglass in it. And we notice when they walk in, the gear mechanism is flipped over and the sand is coming down through it. And this masked man ends up coming out at them and killing them off one by one. And every single one of them dies. And they all wake up in a spot that they were standing in before that all happens. And they quickly find out that wherever they are, whatever this place is, there are a ton of creatures here that are going to kill them off one by one. And the only way that they are going to be able to survive is if they make it until the next morning. So, like I said, I thought this was a lot of fun. It's definitely a very, very flawed movie, but there's a lot of things that I appreciate about it. For starters, I really love the aesthetic of this, isolating the characters in this location, but paying very close attention to detail, to the production design and the effects, really makes it easy to immerse yourself into. Not each and every one of these villains that are showcased, they're not necessarily explained, but what's really cool is the way David F. Sandberg incorporates things like masks and pieces of equipment that they use kind of tell a story about who these characters are, which is what I really appreciate. It gives the villains like an interesting lore without like having overly expositional dialogue to tell the entire story. And the masks in this are super creepy. There's this old woman in one scene that's like wearing like a mask. There's a lot of these like zombie-esque looking creatures, some of them almost reminiscent of like the villains in Resident Evil. And I really liked that. And they're in this mining community, and there's a lot of going on about this town and like learning the history of that. And really, the production design and the aesthetic of the film is what kept me hooked. I also really like this concept of you're dying over and over again and you have to try to survive through the night. And what I found so fascinating was like you can kind of see the wear and tear on them each and every time, and they're sort of like transforming and shifting, and things about them are changing. And I think adding a quality like that makes the ticking clock element of the film work so much more palpably. You need something that's like keeping you invested and that's keeping you guessing, and having that showing on these characters' faces is really what made it an immersive experience. And the other part of the film, and this is a positive and a negative, the movie goes into a direction where it kind of utilizes its allegory for depression and anxiety and trauma, and like how that kind of eats away at you and slowly destroys you until you can turn into something entirely different. And I don't think the film necessarily explores it in a way that's completely and totally fulfilling. It all comes into play at about the last 25 or 30-minute mark. But I really liked that. I thought it was interesting in relation to like our lead character and the shock and trauma of her sister disappearing and like what she's living through. We learn that she's had depressive episodes in the past. And so I thought David F. Sandberg was on to something here. I wish that they would have explored it a little more in detail to where it would have paid off in a completely satisfying way. But that's a pretty minimal gripe. I do appreciate whenever directors can kind of tie in horror with real trauma. I think that that makes it all the more satisfying and makes it hit harder emotionally. My biggest issues with this movie, honestly, the performances aren't that great. Some of the actors are stronger than the others, but the big problem I have with this movie, the dialogue is atrocious. A lot of the attempts of humor in this movie really don't land. I was in like a semi-crowded auditorium and the reactions just were not there. Like every time they were trying to land humor or anything, it just feels like it fell incredibly flat. The relationships that they build up, incredibly cliche. I kept thinking early 2000s horror movie, which has its positives and negatives, which is like I stated at the beginning of the review, a lot of the things I love about early 2000s horror movies, whether that's like House of Wax, House on Haunted Hill, Urban Legend, a lot of those movies, like they're fun even though they're really bad, and a lot of that is due to aesthetic choices and production design and the look of those things. And that's what this movie has in droves. It's just the performances and the dynamic between the characters. It's also incredibly forced, and it makes it difficult to stay invested for each individual character. I didn't find myself feeling the suspense or the tension for the people specifically, more just the scenario, which kind of takes away from the experience. I think if you would have casted some stronger actors, or if this was done by a different director, not saying David F. Sandberg did a horrible job, but I think you have so much here and there's so much that you could do that I feel like they did pretty much the bare minimum with that, which, like I said, it's still incredibly enjoyable. It's a fun experience, but I think you could have got a heck of a lot more out of this than what actually was achieved. So have you seen Until Dawn? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was incredibly entertaining, but it definitely has its fair share of flaws. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.